Hi, everybody. I think we're live now for the second panel of HIGHTECH VENTURE DAYs. So we can all go cameras on, and excited to be with everybody. I apologize for my background. I'm actually mobile myself at the moment, and will need to put on my mask shortly. But I'm Colin, Hanna. I'll be moderating the discussion today. I'm a venture capitalist at Balderton Capital, based in London. We're a leading Series A venture firm investing in European founders with global ambitions. And one of the topics that we are very excited about in recent years is recent shifts in mobility, everything from autonomous driving to micromobility. So very excited to have everybody with us today. We have a great panel, including two tier one auto supply companies, Continental and Maxion wheels, and two of the leading OEMs in the auto industry, Volkswagen and Volvo. So excited to be here today. Why don't we kick off with some brief introductions around the table? Saul, you're at the top left of my screen, so why don't we kick off with you?
Hello, everybody, and thanks, Colin. So my name is Saul Reichman, originally from Israel, but for the past 3 years living in Germany. I reside in Cologne. I'm the Global Director of Innovation and Corporate Venturing for Maxion Wheels. In 2019, I established Maxion Advanced Technology, what we call MAT, which is a strategic initiative focusing on future of mobility. In the past, prior to my move to Germany, I lived in Israel, in Tel Aviv. I was a venturing advisor for Porsche Digital, and I also established Renault's Innovation Lab. I have a venture capital background, and my academic background is in chemistry. I have a PhD in physical chemistry from Tel Aviv University. That's me in a nutshell.
Thanks, Saul. I think I have Thomas next.
Let's put the microphone on. Hi, my name is Thomas Gallner. So I work for the Volkswagen, for the car software organization, so newly founded. So our job is really to build up an own operating system for Volkswagen, and also to increase the functional software from 10% to 60%. So this is basically the big endeavor we have in front of us. My history, so I've done quite a lot of stuff. So my major has been a microsystem technology. So I'm a technology person by studying, but I did many stuff. But in the last 12 to 13 years, I've been always kind of in this future arena, so dealing with future stuff. And yeah, that's me, and looking forward to the discussion right now.
Thank you, Thomas. I'll have to ask you later on what functional software means in the context of a car, but we can get to that later. Karolina, it'd be great if you could introduce yourself.
Okay, hi, my name is Karolina Bjurehed. I'm working as head of investment relations at Volvo Car Technology Fund. I'm a computer scientist from the beginning. Live in Sweden, work at the headquarters in Gothenburg. I've been with Volvo for 9 years soon, and my background is actually within connectivity and innovation and some sort of business development. I used to work with Ericsson, so there you see the connectivity part, and I've been with the tech fund for around 6 months. Before that, it was mainly innovation. So I always try to push Volvo to do new stuff and to explore new areas of technology, and I've been this person that is not the person that is the difficult one, trying to challenge others. And now I'm happily to join the tech fund to see it from the other side, and then look at the investments, the strategic investments instead. Thank you.
Thank you, Karolina. And finally, we have Nils.
Great. So hello, everybody. My name is Nils. I am the founding partner of Continental Venture Capital, which is Continental's corporate venture capital unit, which I built up together with another colleague in 2018 in order to pursue financially driven VC investments in the wider mobility space. We're fully operational since 2019, a brand new setup. We invest thesis-driven on a global scale, and we usually focus on Series A and B investments and have made 6 investments in this new structure until today.
Great to have you, Nils. So we have a pretty diverse set of perspectives around the table. Everything from kind of pure venture to software focused to innovation focused. I guess why don't I start off with a more general question, which is, can we discuss a little bit about what it's like within each organization who knows that the model of the 20th century, needs to be rewritten, whether that's about electrification, whether that's about new ownership models, new autonomy, fuel efficiency. How overall, the perspective I think from the public has been that car makers have been slow to change, that it's taken the success of something like Tesla to really shake up the industry and to have people realize the importance of climate change and of consumers in driving new choices for how they own their cars and move around. I was wondering, as sort of gadflies within your respective organizations in terms of trying to instill change, how receptive are top levels of management and are the bread and butter of your respective organizations to doing what needs to be done to really, have success in the 21st century? I will start picking on people, but I'd rather not have to.
Okay, well, I don't mind kicking off if that's okay. Well, I would say that at least from my perspective, I can certainly confirm that there's a lot of momentum and enthusiasm inside Continental. I totally understand that the wider public oftentimes tends to perceive, tier 1 suppliers as kind of slow in innovating, kind of late to the whole party and stuff. But from the inside, I can certainly confirm that there's tremendous momentum across various business units and areas. Continental as such has always been a, largely decentral organization when it comes to assigning entrepreneurial freedom to the particular business areas. So actually, I can confirm that over each central business area, there are various efforts in progress with regards to innovating in those set areas. Especially when it comes to the setup of Continental Venture Capital, I'm actually quite happy to be able to say that so far we have received every kind of support that we needed, and both the executive board as well as the supervisory board hasn't stepped back from their initial support, which has been tremendous so far. Because essentially we were being set up as part of a wider strategy program with regards to connecting closer to the startup ecosystem. We are one of 2 units. The other unit is called Copace, which is also globally distributed and focuses more on the, initiating operational partnerships between Continental's business units and external startups, based on the white spaces that they have jointly identified with the operational business units. Both of these kind of initiatives have been launched, in 2017 and 2018, basically long before we were hit by this current pandemic situation. But even despite the pandemic, I'm very, very happy to say that the support hasn't faded at all. We have remained fully operational until this day. We've had various transactions where basically the entire syndicate was relying on Conti as an investor. So at least in that regard, I can totally confirm that we are very active and have been, showing a strong integrity so far.
I can go next. I think one of the positive side with being quite small car brand is, Volvo is of course smaller than Volkswagen, for example, and I think the benefits of that is that we can be innovative, we can move faster, and when it comes to innovation, we invented a 3-point belt that saves lives. So we are doing a lot within the innovation area to actually continue to create safe cars, mainly, of course, and really, really fun cars. So I think that, I don't see that we are, innovation is one of our heritage. That's something that the management always tells us to continue to work on, and we need to be innovative to continue to lead the automotive industry. So, yeah.
And I suppose, Saul, Nils, I mean, as tier 1 suppliers, if I'm not mistaken, of wheels and tires, at least, top of my mind, there's a degree of, any car, no matter what the drivetrain is powered by, is going to need a wheel and a tire. And so, I figure if we had a tier 1 supplier there that was, critical for the manufacturing of a combustion engine, it might be a little bit of a different story. Am I right about that? That it's sort of, to you, it doesn't really matter who's and what kind of fuel is powering the car and who's building it. It needs to turn around and hit the road somehow. Saul, you're on mute if you're speaking.
Yes, thanks, Colin. The wheels need to continue to keep on turning. So you are right, Colin. Maxion is the world's largest wheel manufacturer, so we support all of the OEMs. Karolina mentioned Volvo, but we touch on all of our customers in the automotive industry. I would say that innovation is an integral part of Maxion's mindset, starting from the top management. We started internally initially, making sure that we have the innovation infrastructure, the innovation culture embedded inside the corporate. During the last, I would say, 1.5 years, we have ventured outside. So with the Berlin Innovation Lab, we're looking to tap into industry insights and trends coming from the outside, focusing on the future of mobility. I think in the next in the next panel's questions, you will be addressing trends like electrification. So for sure, I mean, we're looking into those trends that will influence the future of our business. For sure, wheels will continue to turn, and the industry will look for that. But we, as an industry leader, we need to be on top of things and need to be ahead of our competitors.
Maybe let me also now say a few words about what are the current challenges and how to be innovative. For me, it's basically three topics where we have to look, where we have to innovate. The one is the product itself, so it's the vehicle. I will detail right now further on a little bit. So how to innovate the vehicle itself, then the ecosystem. A lot has happened in the last years in the ecosystem. And just to mention a couple of things here, like you've seen a couple of OEMs really now shooting up satellites in the air. It's not only one, but more OEMs going in this. Other OEMs, they're really building now cities close to mountains, saying, okay, how to build ecosystem in a city. Also the transfer to really from transport to mobility systems. And last but not least, still a lot of innovation around process, which is also quite important, but which might not be the focus here today in this panel. And if we come back to this first of the three, the product, and if we move back to transport very, very far ago, when you think about horses, of course, the horse got replaced by first a combustion engine. Now the combustion engine is being replaced by an electric engine. So this is innovation has here always taking place. The next one is about the driver. The driver is getting not really replaced, but really supported by more algorithms and artificial intelligence. So really this whole self-driving stuff that the cars drive by their own. And last but not least, which I think is also a very interesting one, if you look in the inside of the car in the cabin where riding a horse, it was sometimes not so comfortable. It's gotten more comfortable, and we're coming a long way from driving pleasures or really having fun at driving. And I think here the trend is more and more towards quality time. So everything is about how to feel well, how to do things in your car you've never done before. And these are the three arenas we all have to play. And so therefore innovation is bigger than ever, I would say, in the mobility area. But in order to be successful, it's also important to focus. And yeah, with the car software organization, we set our focus to software, saying, okay, we want to put really a big stake on it. But I would say that the arena for innovation has never been more open in the automotive arena or mobility arena.
And Thomas, now maybe you mentioned in your introduction, you spoke about, your challenge at Volkswagen was taking the functional software of the vehicle from 10% to 60%. I have to say I drive in Volkswagens a fair amount, and I find most of my software comes from Apple because I plug in and use CarPlay. So could you maybe talk a little bit more about, what that means in the context of Volkswagen's own software stack?
So the one thing is this is the operating system, and where we said, okay, we want to build our own operating system. And the reason is also quite simple. If you look into today's car, like a Golf class car, you have 80 ECUs typically in a car, sometimes more, like high-end class cars that 130, 140 ECUs. So 130, 140 little ECUs in a car, little computers, they all have to talk with each other, they're communicating. You have many, many different kind of bus systems. You have CAN, you have LIN, you have MOST, you have FlexRay, you have SAND, you have Ethernet, and so on. You name it, analog as well. So it's really a high complexity. So we can manage it. I mean, otherwise the cars would not run it. But I think it's also now the next step is to simplify it again. And so we say, okay, let's move on and try to do a next simplification. That's one reason why we say, okay, we want to really target one OS, one operating system. That Volkswagen is pushing. I mean, other companies have the same target if you read the press. And the other one, what I call functional software, application software, basically usually the software you as end user see, because the operating system usually you don't see it. If the timing doesn't work, okay, sometimes you feel it. Or if the music, if you have like first audio, you get into your car and you want to listen to the music after 1 or 2 seconds. And if this does not work sometimes properly, then it might be operating system issue, then you feel it and hear it. But usually what we say from this 10% to 60%, this is what's basically what is application software. So really what the user like HMI or really programming our own cameras and stuff like this. This is also a thing we are targeting.
Great. And Thomas, you mentioned in your answer something about challenges. I guess I wanted to ask each of you from your perspective, firstly, from a technical perspective, if your companies weren't able to solve this issue, in 10 or 15 years' time, they would no longer have a competitive product. And secondly, from a business model perspective, if this particular challenge to the business model was not confronted successfully, the company and the entire business might be, confronted with really big challenges within the next 10 to 15 years. Could I hear from each of you sort of what those big challenges are in your respective organizations?
So I can continue if you like, but no matter who likes. So I mean, we're all in a kind of, I would say, kind of transformation. I mean, if you look at Volkswagen, of course, we're having a long history as a mechanical company, moving to an electrical company or integrating electrical stuff and now going to the software arena. Of course, this brings along challenges because if you deal with software, it's much different than if you deal with mechanical issues. And I usually like your example of the Stacy matrix or Cunningham model. I don't know if you're familiar with this. And Stacy and Cunningham, they describe, okay, is it simple? Is it complicated? Is it complex? Or is it chaos? And for me, this model is also a good model to interact with startups, because usually, like if you work with big companies goal is to move from complex things to complicated, to make it simple, to make it reproducible and repeatable. Because everybody of us wants to have a car. If you buy a Golf or if you buy a Passat or ID3, you want to have every car look the same, work the same, and you don't want to have the cars work different. So that's why we really look very eager on simple processes that every is repeatable and reproducible. But if the more you move to the software area, the more you move from the simple to the complicated to the complex. And in the complex arena, that's where you speak about these agile processes. Because I don't know who of you has kids, maybe some of you have kids. And the typical example is if you have a kid and you know how to educate one kid, if you apply the same things to the second kit, usually it doesn't work. And that's what you call complex, because in a complicated scenario, usually what you've done before, it works. Basically buying a 6-cylinder or buying an E machine or an inverter, it usually applies. But in complex problems, this does not apply sometimes, and that's why we go for agile. And usually in my discussions I had with startups, they even operate sometimes in the chaotic field. So they operate in regions where there is no really, the requirements are not clear, the solutions are not clear. They just try out the new business model. So really just from operating, just from trying, they move from the chaotic to the kind of complex area. And this is something what I usually like to engage with the startups, really to interact on this field. And on the other side, give them an understanding, okay, usually in big companies, the goal is really to make everything as simple as possible, because we want to have the same quality for every kind of product we're delivering. So this is what I have to say here.
I think we are going through a similar transformation as you do in Volkswagen, Thomas. I think it's very similar, and I recognize almost everything you say. So that was a good one. I mean, the challenge is like coming now is that the user wants to have an experience. We're talking about the user experience when it comes to using a car. We don't talk about owning cars. This is I mean, electrification and the AD. Yes, that's super exciting, but it's also about the customer and to be a part of the customer's ecosystem and what that means. So that's very interesting when it comes to the work we do with startups that can help us to find new way to get a better experience for the customers, for the users, I would say. I don't know if the future of mobility will be shared or not. This pandemic might turn things around. We have to see, but at least we are not going to own things in the way we used to do.
So I can continue after Karolina, and at least from a tier one like ourselves that produces wheels and chassis, we're still very much hardware, and so we continue to look into hardware, but of course. Like everybody in the industry, we want to go up the value chain. So, of course, topics of digitalization are, of course, of interest to us. So I would say to your question, of course, trends like electrification, they are, of course, influencing, us as a wheel manufacturer and chassis, for example, with regards to aerodynamics and noise reduction. And in general, if you look at topics related to our environment, circular economy, then, of course, we look into looking into lighter weight materials. And with any production lines, and I think this refers to all four of us, general topics like Industry 4.0, IoT, maintenance optimization, we're all looking to become better at what we're doing in order to become more efficient. So especially during Corona times, working remotely, this is even strengthened, So to your question, I think that topics that I touched on are definitely something that going forward, we will even look closer as this industry is disrupted by the Teslas and the likes.
Yeah, I can totally relate to the previous points. And from a supplier or tier one perspective, I certainly can confirm that, let's say, the recent increased focus on changing customer preferences, for example, towards alternative ownership models, at the end of the day, is certainly amplified at the supplier's end, as we kind of need to help the OEMs to equip those cars that ultimately enable new ownership models and new business models. So from a, let's say, a content perspective, I see kind of, let's say, two waves that we are kind of about to face. The first wave is actually, let's say, the focus on the actual enabling technologies of the car of the future. So we already mentioned all these buzzwords, let's say autonomy, And we're not only talking about level 4, level 5 autonomy, but also advanced driver assistance systems such as level 2 plus and level 3, which is kind of the new bread and butter for tier 1 suppliers going forward that focus on ADAS systems. All of these solutions that ultimately enable new business models such as robo-taxis, advanced car sharing, etc., all of those still require, let's say, new technological components, which we so far, let's say, at least don't have in a perfectly mass marketable state. So all of these new technologies that you see in the areas of camera, radar, LiDAR, everything surrounding the ADAS system, they're all at the moment still, let's say, impressive, but still lighthouse projects. And it still remains to be seen which technology in which kind of version will ultimately manage to enable the mass market. So really bring higher levels of autonomy, for example, to the wider customer base. So this is kind of the first area that we're focusing on, which is also kind of close to what Conti does. So all of these sensor components that I just mentioned, back in the day, they used to be, let's say, in a simplified manner speaking, they used to be commodity components. There was a rather low area, let's say, rather low level of differentiation. But when we look at new ownership models, autonomous cars, etc., those commodity components suddenly have turned into a source of active technological differentiation. So the way we used to think about radar, camera, and LiDAR sensors right now has completely changed. And so far, nobody has, let's say, a winning formula for the entire stack. So this is kind of the first wave that we are focusing also from an investment perspective before we can actually, let's say, actively address potential business model innovation, which is kind of, which I at least see as a second step once it's actually technologically possible.
Thank you, everybody, for those answers. I wanted to touch on a couple of you mentioned, COVID-19 and its impact on your respective businesses, whether, there was maybe a seemingly inevitable move to shared, and maybe that's been stalled. Similarly, there was this idea that car ownership was the thing of the past, but obviously, this environment has put a premium on independence and the ability to be isolated and mobile. But obviously also it's hurt people's wallets, and economic activity has come down. I was wondering very quickly, just to hear a little bit about how COVID has impacted your businesses and the way it's impacted the way you think about the future.
I mean, I can start with a personal statement on COVID. My daughter, she's doing her driving license right now, so she's 17, and she's not sitting like I have done my driving license. You're sitting with 2 or 3 other people in the car and you learn from each other. No, she sits alone with the driving teacher in the car, and every 45 minutes they have to have a 5 or 10 minute break, to get out the car, to open everything. So COVID definitely has changed the mobility behavior. So this is what I see in my private life. And from the professional life, of course, we have the discussions. I see also people using more the personal car, driving alone, and people really trying to avoid public transport. So this is what I see right now. But okay, who never knows how long COVID takes. And I cannot predict how long it will take. But I see definitely, but more from this personal perspective, a change in behavior, a change in personal behavior, how you deal with transportation.
Yeah. And you also see here in Sweden, you see that people's behavior are changing. You mentioned that, Thomas, when it comes to traveling, you are traveling within your own country much more than you used to do. And you don't want to use the public transportation, so you actually use a car. And that's quite fascinating to see. And I've also seen that people tend to move out of the cities. I'm not sure it would be something we see happening over the years, but right now you can see that the prices on houses on the countryside is actually higher, and people want to move out of cities. That requires also another type of transportation need. So COVID changes our lives a lot and our behavior a lot. We will see how long this effect will be and what else it will change. It has changed is that we are now truly digital. I think that was one of the biggest benefits, to be honest. I mean, wow, we can work from anywhere these days, and we are truly digital. Yeah, that was my view.
Yeah, I can totally relate to this point that Karolina just mentioned, in the sense that I think the entire industry and also we in our private lives have largely recognized how autonomous we can be even without an office, without a physical office, that we don't need to sit together necessarily. So at the moment, my team or my colleagues, we are basically spread all over the place and sitting in front of Teams most of the time, but it's actually surprisingly effective. With regards to the point that Thomas mentioned earlier on, I think from a private perspective, I can definitely confirm that there has been a shift in customer preferences with regards to the mobility option at hand. So I'm based out of Berlin. I used to use public transport every day. I myself don't own a car. I'll try to never own one. But I certainly love to use cars. I basically use all of the car sharing models, business and apps that you have basically. But when Corona first hit Berlin, you saw kind of two things. The one shift was basically away from public transport, so nobody was using the tube or the tram and all of these things. Secondly, nobody was using the car sharing models until those companies came up with advanced, let's say, cleaning regimes. And thirdly, most of the people actually try to, at least in, let's say, populated areas, try to switch back to actually very, very old-fashioned models of individual transport, such as the bicycle or scooters, if you want to be more modern. But that's kind of something that I've definitely seen on the private space. I think when it comes to cars, I personally believe that the, let's say, overarching trend away from, let's say, individual ownership will not, I think in the end, it will not be stopped by this whole pandemic situation. But so the kind of urge to have a, let's say, individual access to a vehicle will remain and even go stronger. I'm totally on board with that. But this can still be achieved via alternative ownership models. So you don't necessarily have to buy and own a car in order to have individual access. You might as well lease it, rent it, subscribe to it. There's various models, and I think those will receive more momentum in the next months and years to come.
Thank you, Nils. I have to say a plug that there's a lot of bikes these days that aren't so old-fashioned. So if you go and you check out your latest electric bike shop, you'll see tremendous options on the table these days. It's just a small plug from my behalf.
We're looking into. Sorry,
go ahead, Saul.
I was going to say that we're following up very closely on new entrants and new mobility solutions. Of course, people addressed micro mobility. That's an interesting segment that we want to follow up on. We want to see how that is developing and how that is becoming hopefully more profitable over time. Of course, Karolina also addressed digitalization. We're all becoming more digital, but I think especially during these times when we want to become more efficient. So we are looking into optimizing our maintenance, looking into market-driven analytics, looking into production performance optimization. So these are topics that everybody's looking into, and personalization. That is a big topic that everybody wants to see where that will take us. And so we're following up closely on that. Last but not least, I think this is something that everybody shares, is that we see an increase in the life cycle of vehicles. So that is also something, understanding what is the second-hand vehicle usage and how that is affecting us as a tier one in the automotive industry. That is something to look into going forward.
Thank you, Saul. I'm aware that many of our audience members are sort of young, inspiring companies that are trying to serve each of you in your supply chains and in your tech stacks. And in your business models. And I guess, we've touched on various in the last 35 minutes, but, hearing a little bit more concretely about, what kind of businesses you're looking to partner with, what are the really salient characteristics that when you consider young companies, what are those characteristics that you're really looking for? And then I think we'll have time to turn to questions from the audience.
So then let me start. What I'm looking for. So regarding software, one hot topic is for me, and like if you remember, like my beginning statement, I see basically 3 areas of innovation. Like the one is really on the product side, on a vehicle on its own. Second is on an ecosystem, and the last one is on a process side. And sometimes this process side gets forgotten, but especially if you think about software, I think where is a big step to go is how can we further automate software. So, and there are a couple of companies out there, some of them I talked already, and sometimes very impressive. So people really writing on a whiteboard, and a camera see what these people are writing on a whiteboard, and this automatically gets translated into code. So in this case, for example, HTML code or some whatever. And how can we further work on use AI also for software automation? And the examples from China or other countries where AI really pushes automatization. And this is for me a hot topic. How can we further work on automation also in the software arena? This is an important topic for me, because in the end, automatization saves time, and saving time enables us to have again more quality time. And this is basically all what we human, I think, want to run for quality time, and have time for our kids, have time for our family, enjoy our cars, riding to the countryside and stuff like this.
Other businesses or problems that you're hoping that young innovative companies can solve, or Nils, businesses that have been interesting, new opportunities for your new fund?
Yes, no, absolutely. So as I mentioned earlier, at least kind of from our point of view, we see kind of two interesting waves that we are kind of facing. One is basically the wave of enabling technologies that need to be, let's say, qualified for automotive use case and applications in order to ultimately enable new data-driven business models. Both are areas where we obviously want to have or enlarge our footprint. The automotive or autonomy area being the closest one. So let's kind of say in the area of basically all topics surrounding the autonomy of the vehicle, we are very much focusing on enabling technologies, both on the hardware and software side, when it comes to the autonomy or autonomous operation of the car, but also on the, let's say, in-cabin applications within the car, related to the earlier points that were mentioned, as in advanced HMI experiences, multimedia entertainment, etc. I think another area that we're also looking at when it comes to autonomy is not just, innovating new sensors, which we do together with startups, by the way. So because, let's say, Continental is very strong in qualifying new components for serial production in automotive and in manufacturing at scale, and knows the necessary steps it takes to qualify a new product for automotive vehicles. The areas where we see a bottleneck is actually at the very front of the deep technology stack. So when it comes to the actual sensor, or when it comes to advanced AI that is being deployed to run on this sensor at minimum compute, all of these things are areas where we see strong, let's say, synergies with startups in that field, and we are actively working with various of them. And for example, 2 of the most recent investments that I led were both autonomous driving sensor companies. One was a LiDAR company out of Munich, Blickfeld, and the other one was a Israeli AI perception software company out of Tel Aviv. So all of these are companies that are, let's say, at the very front of the edge, and have strong potential synergies with our expertise of actually getting into the car. That's kind of the first key area I see at Conti. When it comes to the, let's say, business model innovation around data monetization, obviously, when you think about it, let's say we are able to provide all of these sensor technologies, etc. These sensor technologies will also generate a lot of data. At the moment, we still need to figure out how to properly access those and also monetize those for our purposes, and also potentially use them as a way for us to get closer to the end customer as a tier one, which is something that historically we're not used to. So those are certainly the two kind of key areas where we are doing a lot of stuff and have also made investments.
So for us, partnering with startups, academia, that is something that in the end, of course, we want to understand the future. The best way to understand the future is really to understand what's happening around us. And we look into this first and foremost in order to see how we can become more efficient and reduce, in the end, R&D expenditures. That is the focus. We also want to benchmark current technologies that we're developing and understand, how the industry is looking at that. So to be more specific, of course, lightweight materials, that is a big topic that we're focusing on, aerodynamics, functionality. These are all relevant to the product side of innovation. We're also focusing on process innovation and also new business model. Of course, the latter is more difficult, more challenging. And in that sense, there are topics like circular economy that are, of course, pushing us and helping us drive into that new business model type of innovation. But that is not something that that is easy to grasp, especially being a tier one, Besides that, looking into noise reduction, that is a topic that, if I didn't mention, that is also something that we are looking into. And, reduction in general, tooling cost reduction, how to, become more efficient with the resources that we currently have. That is something that, especially during these times, we put a lot of focus on.
I actually think that was a very interesting point that Saul just mentioned, especially in the context, let's say, if we think about kind of new trends that are not necessarily directly related to mobility. So in simple terms, sustainability. I actually think that this is, especially from a tier one perspective, a super exciting time, because I think we are in a very unique situation in the sense that if you look at the wider automotive industry, obviously there's a pressure on all of us, as in, governments doubling down on CO2 emissions, etc. Which, this pressure obviously is affecting the OEMs. They need to address it. But at the same time, this effect will also be passed on to the tier one supplier because we need to help them address those requirements. So I think following some of the most recent announcements, actually, it's safe to say that sustainability-related criteria will be selection-based criteria that will be introduced by many OEMs. So those are all kind of things that put us under, as a tier one, under basically short-term or immediate pressure to innovate. At the same time, let's say the overall kind of hampered growth in international markets, as well as the recent Corona pandemic, have severely depressed our budgets to innovate. So basically, the pressure to innovate has never been higher. At the same time, the budgets available to innovate have never been smaller. So this actually increases the pressure for us to innovate openly, potentially in collaboration with startups, which is what we already do.
So I can add a few interesting areas that we are looking into. I think we mentioned several of the areas that are super interesting. I mean,
to mention.
Yeah, material innovation. With regards to material innovation, I think you hit you hit the nail with the hammer exactly. It's first of all, regarding lightweight materials. This can, pertain to aerodynamics. This can relate to noise reduction. We're looking into composites, for example. You see now, for example, with Tesla, with the one-piece casting chassis. So looking into more simpler production. This is something that is also related to materials. So yeah. Also with regards to Karolina touched on sustainability. So the way the materials we use are manufactured, the environmental, challenging our suppliers with regards to environmental aspects. That is something that is also related to materials. So the topic of lightweight materials is broad, but I'm happy to take any questions from the startup later, for sure.
Great.
One to the just mentioned topics from Saul and before also about the circular economy. I think materials, they're also important in terms of if you think about smart materials. And if you think about back cars 20, 30 years ago, I mean, and if you compare it with the human senses, I mean, a car did not have any senses, they just have action and driving. And then we built in the first cameras in the car. So basically you can compare it with our eyes. Cars are able to hear now, so we're building in microphones in the car, and also like with smart materials, like the touching sense. I think there's also potential how to think about what senses do you need in a car, and how can you think about smart materials. So there's also, I think, a lot of things to do. We have not thought about it, and cameras. I mean, everybody knows, but there's much more to it than cameras inside the car. And just think about the human senses. And think about smart materials, what we can do here.
Great, and welcome back to all those. I know our stream was down for a second. And I'm going to make a pitch now. Are there any other questions from the audience? We have about 10 minutes left, and we'd love to hear from all of you. So if you have any questions for Saul, Thomas, Nils, Karolina, please drop them in the chat for us. We'll see if those come through. Maybe I can ask you guys just a future kind of optimistic question. If each of you had your own way, by 2050, what would your companies be doing that they're not doing today?
Maybe I just kick off. Short disclaimer. Obviously, this is my personal thoughts. But if I had it my way, with regards to what Conti's doing in 2050, I would certainly say that apart from what they're already doing, I think they will have achieved a major transition, also kind of, let's say, beyond automotive, or just kind of beyond the key focus on ground transportation as such. Because as we already mentioned, the previous trends, especially surrounding, sustainability, circular economy, new materials in that very context, those actually contain so many areas that are not directly related to automotive, where Conti, let's say, as an industry enabler, could potentially play a role. Maybe to give you a quick, concrete example, one of the things that we are looking at from the VC unit, for example, is advanced solutions to enable supply chain tracking and transparency, but at the kind of nanostructure level with regards to advanced materials, in order to be tracking where they're coming from, when they have been manufactured, all of this stuff. This is things that not only the automotive industry has to do, but pretty much anyone that uses, rubber components, plastics, and what have you. This is something that is relevant to so many other industries. And I think that's would be a great kind of opportunity to go into.
I'm hearing Nils speak, and I pretty much can imagine what startup he's referring to, without mentioning the name, of course. If I had a crystal ball for Maxion is a 100-year-old company, and for sure, as an industry leader, with the production of wheels, for sure it will continue to manufacture wheels. But I would love to see it, of course, move up the value chain. Looking into not just automotive, but looking into other segments of mobility. And like Nils mentioned, we are looking at so many topics that are also relevant for other industries. I would love to see Maxion also cater to those needs that other industries are looking to tap into with regards to technologies.
And Karolina, any last thoughts for you?
I try to look into the crystal ball here and see what the future holds, but it's difficult to say. But I hope we continue to create a customer experience. What that means, but we are going to do it in a circular and sustainable process where you can track all materials, you like have control over the whole chain, and that would create a solution that is a part of your ecosystem and makes value and makes your life more easy. That was fluffy, I know, but it's difficult to say. Are we going to create cars? Who knows? We'll have to see. Hopefully we do.
Great. Well, I think there are no more questions coming in on the line. I just double checked. So why don't we leave it there with the panel? I thank you all for your time. Hopefully, through the work you're doing, we can get closer to that future. And anybody on the line, please don't hesitate to reach out if there are further questions that come out after reviewing the panel. And with that, wish everybody a great week.
Thank you. Keep safe.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.